down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and I am your host, Rick. So tonight, I want to kind of talk a little bit because, I'll be honest with you, I've been spending a lot of time on social media, my off hours, and I'll be honest with you, I've been looking at a lot of people out there who have a little trouble understanding the Constitution and our way of government. And, you know, honestly, I probably shouldn't be too surprised about this. However, it does cause some concern. I've seen a lot of especially tweets, but I've seen a lot of information going around. I've seen a lot of videos. I've seen a lot of people just getting up in arms. And most of it has to deal with the fact that you have a Missouri abortion law that is up against the Supreme Court this week. You have the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals dealing with the Biden OSHA mandates for the vaccines. And now Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, arguably one of the greatest governors ever, but he has decided that he wants to resurrect the Florida State Guard. And what does that mean? Well, that means that he wants to basically bring up a military that is not part of the National Guard or the National Forces. Now, you know, just those three things in and of itself, I'm going to kind of go through each one a little bit and talk a little bit about how the Constitution sort of ties in with all of them, to be honest with you. And really it boils down to mostly just one singular amendment that really should be in focus here. But the reality of it is that there's a lot of misconceptions about our type of government and how our government works and how it should work and how it is working today. But before I get into that, let me go ahead and bring up a very apropos spot. The Institute on the Constitution. I am an affiliate member for this. So, the Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following three key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, theamericanview.com/# Whiskey Musings to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is theamericanview.com, all one word, all lowercase, /# Whiskey Musings, all one word, all lowercase, to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's theamericanview.com /# Whiskey Musings. Go check them out today. All right. So, realistically, what is going on today? We've this whole idea, and honestly, I see COVID kind of as a huge factor in understanding our Constitution. And I'm not talking about COVID as the virus itself. What I'm talking about is the way that our government has been reacting to it and how certain things have been going on. Case in point, the vaccine mandates being pushed by our president currently, Biden, and his administration, trying to make an end run around the Constitution, honestly, in my opinion, and opening up OSHA for these mandates, trying to push OSHA to force businesses that are over 100 people to mandate that everyone there gets the vaccine. Again, to be honest, I'm not a lawyer. I am not a legal scholar in the sense that one would think. But the fact of the matter is that we have a unconstitutional mandate, something that has honestly never been done before at the federal level. Now, you could argue it's been done at the state level, which is a part of this conversation. But honestly, I mean, realistically speaking, the mandates themselves for the federal government and trying to push a non-governmental entity, and by that I mean non-voted on entity outside of Congress, okay, to make this mandate, first of all, is relatively unconstitutional. And the reason that I say that, and some of these other pieces tonight will go back to one singular amendment that is part of the Constitution. And I want to read that to you. I want to read its exact wording to you so that you can understand where I am coming from here. And I got to find it first, because this book, which, by the way, if you have interest, this is where I'm going to be looking. This is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. It's put out by the Cato Institute. You can find them on Amazon for about $5. It is a great little pocket guide, pocket resource to the Constitution. There's also the other variations that are around. For an example, there is a variation that is being pushed by one of my favorite conservative talk show hosts by the name of Mark Kay. He has one at the the originalvaccinepassport.com. That's all put together. The originalvaccinepassport.com. And basically it is a book that says that it's the original vaccine passport, and then you open it up and it's got the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in it. So you can go and take a look at that, or you can, which, admittedly is a little expensive, or you can go and you could just get this one at Amazon for $5. But let's read about the 10th Amendment. And this is really, really, really important. A lot of people talk about the Second Amendment. They talk about the Fifth Amendment. They talk about the Fourth Amendment. They talk about the First Amendment. Most people can tell you what the First and Second mean. And the Fifth, for anybody that watches any kind of crime dramas, that, I plead the Fifth. That's where that comes from. It's the Fifth Amendment of the United States about the right to not incriminate yourself in your own trial. That being said, the 10th Amendment is pretty important as well. In fact, all of these amendments are very important, and we should really, really, really get involved and get inside these documents, because they are the foundational, whatever you want to call, documents of our country, and everything that we have is derived from these documents. So, the 10th Amendment, and I quote, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people." Now, that's the exact phrasing of the 10th Amendment. But what does that mean? Well, basically what it means is that if it's not documented in here, in the Constitution itself, nor is it documented in here as being not available to the states or taken from the states, then basically the states themselves or the people themselves hold all the cards. They hold everything to this. Now, most people think of our government as, the federal government is this big, huge, top-end thing, and then as you get down to the local governments and get down closer and closer to the individual person, that government gets smaller and smaller. It's actually opposite. It's supposed to be the opposite side of the pyramid, to where the federal government is way at the top and is very, very small. And then as you get closer to the individual people, the government gets bigger and bigger. And the reason why the founders threw that together in that fashion is because of the fact that having a ruling class that is outside of your local persons means that they can do pretty much whatever they want to do to you, sort of like the King of England. I mean, the whole concept, you've got to understand and remember that the whole concept of our government was formulated just shortly after the war with England. And England was a faraway land, and it all started ideally with the Tea Party in Boston Harbor, because they were being taxed more than what they wanted to be taxed, and they felt it was unfair to be taxed as much as they were, and so they threw the tea in the harbor. For those of you that have never done U.S. history, that's the kind of like the catalyst that sort of started this whole movement. And the idea here was that having a long distance government that was overbearing was wrong. And that's why they decided to make the idea that states, local government, they were the ones that truly held the principles for the people. It also had something to do with the fact that you could group people together. Like, for an example, you could group a bunch of Puritans together in the case of way back when, and those Puritans at the local level could decide within the city, the town, the county, what was right for them government-wise and rule-wise, law-wise. And then as you moved up the chain and up the pyramid, it got farther and farther away. There should be less restrictions, less government, less laws being actually enforced. It should be enforced down at the local level. That's essentially what the 10th Amendment is saying, is that if it's not written in here, nor specifically prohibited by this document to the states, then everything else is on the states. The states are the ones that are supposed to control all of this. And this, I think, is the biggest reason as to why you have problems, or why we as people have problems with these federal mandates. This is not the way it's supposed to work, people. The far-off government in Washington, D.C. was not supposed to be this big. In fact, a lot of the things that they are doing over there and have done over there realistically should have been 10th Amendmented. A lot of them. Not going to say all, but a lot of them should be. Now, why did Biden pick OSHA to do this? Why did Biden pick to do this? And plain and simple, honestly, plain and simple, the fact of the matter is that, first of all, mandates, honestly, are not laws. They aren't. They are not laws. Realistically, I'm a little frustrated with the fact that people are thinking that they're legally binding. They are not. All laws, per the Constitution, all laws are supposed to be made by the legislature and voted on by our legislative government, our representative government, whether it's state government or federal government. It is supposed to be voted on by the people. And the reason why Biden is pushing this through OSHA is because of the fact he wants to avoid the idea of having to go and do essentially the long, drawn-out process of making a bill and having it voted on by both the House and the Senate, and the fight that happens in between, and the filibuster in the Senate, and all of these things. There's a reason why the founders put it that way in their document, and it honestly has everything to do with the fact that it's a representative government and that it should be voted on by the people. This is why things like the mandates are not necessarily law. Now, depending upon the states, though, depending upon how the states have their constitutions made and depending upon the legislatures within those states, that is a different story. And this is where I kind of get into the gray area, or where I'm referring to the gray area of the federal mandate versus a mandate by the state. Now, back in 1905, there was a Supreme Court case. It did have to deal with vaccines. However, what it did deal with specifically was having to pay a fine for not getting the vaccine. The fact was that it was upheld at the Supreme Court. And basically what happened was the governor of the state mandated, I believe it was polio, I don't remember for sure, but mandated a polio vaccine. And there was a person who was a religious, what do they call it? A conscientious objector, but he was doing it on religious grounds. And basically what it boiled down to is that the fine was like $5. And he fought the fine because he was like, I don't want to get the shot. I can't pay the fine. I just don't want to do this. And so he ended up taking it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld the fact that you either have the vaccine or the fine. It didn't have anything to do with whether the mandate was legal or not. That wasn't the premise of the legal argument. It had to deal with the fine and having to pay the fine. So that being said, take that into today. There hasn't ever been a mandate per se of vaccines. And the reason why you have the ability to do like religious exemptions. I mean, a lot of people look at the vaccine mandates and they say, well, wait a minute, you have to go and get all of these vaccines in order to attend public school. While that may be true, it's not entirely true, because you can object to them. You can get objections to them. And so you don't necessarily have to get the vaccine in order to go to schools. You just have to have other documentation to basically exempt yourself from it. Now, that being said, there are people in schools, I can tell you in public schools, that are not vaccinated by some of those other vaccines. They're just not. They might be required by the state, but they find other ways around it. And so, again, to be completely honest, I mean, the mandates themselves are questionable as to whether they are unconstitutional, whether they are constitutional or not, whether or not you can have this forced upon you. And this is, again, part of the reason why Biden, who at one time said that he wasn't going to mandate vaccines, and he went ahead and did it, but this is part of the reason why this is going into the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals has already, that's the conglomeration of several states, attorneys general, and even private companies that have all kind of come together to fight this. They've all sort of lumped it into the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, just this week, the Sixth Circuit Court denied Biden's admin two things. One, the moratorium on the vaccine mandate that was put out by the Fifth Circuit Court prior to the consolidation. And the Sixth Circuit Court said, yeah, we're going to uphold that. So they basically told Biden, no, you can't enforce these mandates, which is why you're seeing these news stories and news headlines saying that Biden's mandates are being, pulled back or lifted or whatever. They don't want to tell you that, yeah, it's actually a court order that has specifically said, hey, the courts have some issues with this. We don't think this is legal anyway, so we're going to put a hold on it for now. All right. Now, don't celebrate. If you're thinking this is awesome, don't celebrate too early. All this means is that during the time of the course of the court process, they can't enforce the mandate. Okay. So that's all that means at this point in time. Now, once the decision is made, if it falls into our favor, that's great. But falls into the favor of the people fighting for for avoiding the mandates. Now, I'm going to state for the record, I am not against the vaccines. I am against the mandates. I believe in individual freedom. I believe it is my right as an individual to choose what I am going to put in my body, okay, in terms of a vaccine. And given the track record that is coming out with these vaccines, which is an entirely other discussion whatsoever. But given the track record of these vaccines and what they seem to be doing and what the government might be trying to obscure, and some of the information that's coming out, there might be a good reason not to get it. But there very well could be medical reasons as to why to get it. And that means that it's an individual decision. It is completely up to you as an individual as to whether or not you want this vaccine or not. Okay, so that's that one. That has to deal with the OSHA and the vaccine mandates, okay? And that's still ongoing, by the way. Right now, legal pundits are expecting that this will go all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's very likely that it will. It's very likely that it will. And the reason being is because obviously, if it doesn't fall in Biden's favor, which, speaking about that, he wanted to change a venue. He wanted to move to another circuit court, and the Sixth Circuit Court said, nope, we're not doing that. Mainly because he wanted to move it to what the admin considered a more favorable court, and the Sixth Circuit Court said, yeah, denied. We're not doing that. So, right now his legal team is kind of falling for whatever at this point. They're whiffing the ball in baseball terms for this particular legal battle. Now, another big court case, and this one is at the Supreme Court, but the big court case has to deal with abortion. And basically what it revolves around is this Mississippi abortion law that basically banned abortion from 15 weeks. Essentially, if you were under 15 weeks in Mississippi, I think you could, or maybe it might have been Missouri. Don't quote me on which state. But basically, the law stated originally that 15 weeks, under 15 weeks, you could get an abortion. At 15 weeks and above, you were not able to, because it basically lowered the cutoff. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of the liberal left has the idea that Roe versus Wade is like the de facto law in abortion, and they're freaking out over this because their belief is that the law is going to get overturned if the Supreme Court rules in the favor of this Mississippi law, or Missouri. I'm pretty sure it's Mississippi. Here's the deal with this. So first of all, I'm going to be honest with you. Roe versus Wade, under any sense of the term, should never have been decided at the Supreme Court level. And there is an indication by Justice Clarence Thomas that he believes the same way, because he asked the prosecuting attorney in the case, or the plaintiff attorney in the case, he asked them literally, well, what is your argument? Where within the Constitution are you saying that abortion is a right? Where is it written in the Constitution? And again, I'm going back to the 10th Amendment, where the 10th Amendment basically says that anything that is enumerated within nor prohibited by is left to the states. So realistically, if the court had not decided to intervene, arguably incorrectly, back in the 70s when Roe versus Wade was heard, that it really should have been a states' rights issue. And honestly, where we would see it is we would have some states like California, New York, Washington, Oregon, that probably would have abortion laws in some way, shape, or form. In fact, most of the states probably will still, even if Roe versus Wade or the other one, Casey, I believe it's Casey versus Ferguson, gets overturned, then, the states are going to have it. I mean, that's the thing. It won't be a federal law to quote protect it, but it never was really a law anyway. It was mainly just judges that essentially interpreted the Constitution and the law to basically state that, yeah, there is a right to an abortion within the Constitution. But honestly, I mean, you can argue it either way, but the reality of it is that this really turns out to be a states' rights issue. This should have been a states' rights issue from the beginning. And the 10th Amendment, again, basically says that if it's not in the Constitution, nor specifically prohibited by the Constitution, that it's resolved in the states. Now, abortion could become a federal law if one thing happens. And once again, that goes to the Congress of the United States of America. Again, pushing it back on the legislature to basically make the decision on what this abortion law would look like. And the challenge with that, again, falls in the same deal as to why Biden's gone through OSHA and so on and so forth, is because of the fact they don't want to put it in front of the American people. They don't want to put it in front of the representatives because of the fact that you have representatives, plenty of them, who are going to argue against having an abortion law. Now, abortion at its core, honestly, is a medical procedure. It is... It honestly, if you take all of the moralistic pieces out of it, it literally is a medical procedure. It is one that should be determined by a doctor and an individual. Now, getting to the point of talking to your doctor about an abortion, that becomes a moralistic scenario. And so, honestly, as far as abortion is concerned, there are medical reasons for terminating the life of a pregnancy. There are medical reasons for that. The problem that the left has, or that the liberal left has, is that they are using it as a form of birth control. And to be completely honest with you, I mean, Planned Parenthood, which really is kind of, a lot of people think of abortion, they immediately think of Planned Parenthood. Well, Planned Parenthood has, as its core, its founder, Margaret Sanger, was basically doing Planned Parenthood. And the reason why Planned Parenthood was put into the inner cities and places where Black Americans lived, okay, honestly, is because of the fact that she was a eugenicist. She wanted to get rid of, she was a white supremacist, she was a eugenicist. She wanted to get rid of African Americans and their offspring, and that was her way of doing it. Now, that's how it was formed. That isn't what it is today. However, today, they get paid an exorbitant amount of money from the federal government, and part of the reason for this is because of Roe versus Wade. Now, legally, there is no law on the books that I am aware of that has to deal with abortion. If it was, I'm sure there would be another Supreme Court case. There would be possibly a fight against it, etc. Just like you have with, Obamacare and having to put out contraceptives by Christian organizations. That, this is really the crux of the issue. And honestly, abortion by itself should fall within states' rights. And my viewpoint basically is, if you want to get an abortion, that's fine. I just don't want the taxpayers to pay for it, just like any other procedure that is done in the public sector. You're the one that has to deal with the aftermath. You're the one that you individually have to deal with whatever fallout comes from that. I just don't think that it should be done on the public payroll. And I do believe, like I said, that there are times where abortion is a necessary procedure. However, again, do I think it should be a federal law for it? No, because again, going back to our Constitution, the 10th Amendment, it's not specifically enumerated within it. It doesn't specifically ban it from the states. So therefore, it should be a states' rights issue. And if the court sides on that particular front, then honestly, is it going to ban abortion across the states? No, it's not. And that's a fallacy that the left has thrown out there. Is it going to make things a little more difficult? Sure, because you're going to end up having states like Texas with one law and Washington with another, and California with theirs. You're going to have more liberal states be more forgiving and more how far, how old does the fetus or the child have to be before you can or can't abort it. It's going to light off a bunch of internal state rights issues. But to be honest, that honestly, that's how our government is supposed to work. The federal government is not supposed to dictate to the states what they do, unless, of course, it becomes a bit of a problem with this. Now, there is the issue with the 14th Amendment that shows up as well, and this is where where it becomes even more of a conundrum. But let me read you the text of the 14th as soon as I can find it here. Here we go. The 14th Amendment basically has to deal with, and let me see where the part of it is. Maybe it isn't the 14th. Sorry. I'm looking for the Equal Protection Clause. That's voting. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to you on which one it is. But there is an amendment that talks about the equal protection under the law. And that's where some of this kind of gets really, really sticky. And we have to sort of play a balancing act on all of this in terms of the equal protection under the law versus the states' rights versus, all of these other things that come into play. And this is part of the reason why we need a Supreme Court and legislative and to be able to interpret law that the legislative body creates, which again goes back to our whole 3 branches of government kind of scenario and their specific purposes. Now, again, I'm going to point out to you that just because the Supreme Court may overturn Roe versus Wade literally does not mean that you as an individual do not lose your right to an abortion. Your right, quote unquote. Because again, a right is what's enumerated within the Constitution or given to us by God. Now, somebody might say abortion is given to us by God. It's the right of me having my medical procedure. Well, you need to read your Bible and check all that out if you're really interested in trying to figure out where God would sit on the idea of abortion by itself. I guarantee you it's not going to come out favorable if you think that God was pro-abortion. He's not. But that being said, it is not a right given to us by the Constitution. And again, that phrase, given to us by the Constitution, is wrong. The Constitution itself was designed to limit government. It was supposed to give government a list of things that it was allowed to do, and anything that was not shown in that document was off limits. That's why people talk about, my freedom and my liberty and everything else. It was designed to constrain government, not give government power. Gave government power, yes, but ultimately the people hold the power. And that's been shown multiple times. And if you read the Federalist Papers and even the Anti-Federalist Papers, that becomes fairly clear. All right. So we've talked about the OSHA and the vax mandates. We've talked about, the abortion law that's being thrown out here now. So let's talk about Governor Ron DeSantis. And I got to admit, I'm gonna tell you, this guy, every time I listen to him speak, I like him. I like a lot of things about him. I mean, he is a former military, albeit Navy, but he's former military. He used to be a lawyer, and he has got the idea of the Constitution and understanding how the Constitution works down. He has been able to stand up and in his state, within his state, and this is part of the thing about the government, about the United States government and the founding documents that a lot of people don't understand. Governors actually do have a lot of power by themselves versus the executive branch of the United States government or the president. I mean, for an example, when all those riots and everything that were happening in Portland and in Seattle, President Trump, then President Trump, was talking about sending in the National Guard and sending in federalized troops. And everybody was up in arms about that whole thing. Well, the reason why he couldn't mobilize the National Guard is because of the fact that the National Guard first has to deal or has to answer to the governor of the state. So the governor has to actually say, yeah, I want you to call up the National Guard. I want you to mobilize them. The United States Army as a whole, just the standard army, has a decree and a doctrine, and the name of it escapes me. I think it's called the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically states that the federal government troops cannot operate on American soil to do essentially missions on American soil. This is part of the reason why, in terms of national disasters within states, you only see the National Guard. Now, the National Guard is part of the United States Defense Forces. However, they have to be called up or provided by the governors of those states to go up. They have to be called by the federal government and say, hey, we need to borrow your troops for a little while to go off and do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, which is why during the Iraq War, Desert Storm, and in the initial in Afghanistan, as well as several times in Afghanistan, you would see National Guard troops get called up and they would get taken away for several months on end, sometimes even years on end, to go over there, because they are designed to be supplemental to our regular troops, our regular standing army. Now, if anybody knows anything about American history, having a standing army was actually frowned upon. It was frowned upon by the American people at the time that our founding happened and shortly thereafter. They didn't want a standing army. In fact, in times of war, the idea was that the state militias, hence we're looking at the Second Amendment, the state militias were the first to go, and then the standing army could be raised and brought in to supplement or replace those state militias over time if it became a big enough conflict that would require something like that. So honestly, I mean, everything, again, it all points down to the states. The states have the rights. The states are the ones that are in charge. And the reason for that is, again, goes back to that pyramid that I was telling you. The idea was to have a very small federal government, and then as the closer and closer and closer that you got to the regular populace, the government got larger and larger, or its responsibilities got larger and larger, because of the fact that the government should be represented by the people. And it's very difficult to reach out to the federal government and get anybody to react to anything out there for something that is a state issue, for something that is here in the local states. Now, over the course of the last probably 100 years, we've seen especially the explosion during the FDR era and the the Great New Deal, and all of that. You see the explosion of the federal government. And honestly, this, if you go back, it's mostly Democrats that are doing this, okay? Feel free to check me on this, but mostly Democrats are for big government. Everybody blames the Republicans for that. The reality of it is that the Democrats are the ones that have been responsible for most of that throughout of history. I'm not going to say all, but most of it. Now, in terms of Florida's state governor, he announced just this week, a couple of days ago, that he wanted to renew the idea of and create a state guard. In other words, a state militia. Now, a state militia essentially would be not part of the regular army, not part of the National Guard troops, but it would be beholden directly to the state, to the governor himself. And, you know, a lot of liberals and leftists, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know that this existed, realistically. I always was under the assumption that the National Guard was essentially the state militia, and that's sort of how they got formed. Apparently, I'm wrong. There is close to 20, I've heard 21, I've heard 23 states that actually have state guards, state-run troops that are not beholden to the federal government at all. Now, so Florida apparently disbanded theirs, but DeSantis wants to bring it back. And to be honest with you, I mean, realistically, go for it. I mean, he's the governor. If the legislature and the governor of the state of Florida create this thing and are able to fund it without any kind of public funds from the federal government, hey, have at it. That is all yours. But the panic mode has set in, and they are, a lot of people have been talking about, oh my gosh, all he's doing is he's setting up the state for a showdown. I mean, what's he going to do? Like march on Georgia? Somebody seriously pointed that out in Twitter. They said that. They said that out loud. And, honestly, the real reason to have any kind of state guard, from what I can tell, is essentially to have a small mobile force that is beholden to the governor of the state that can mobilize and enact to threats that are happening locally without having to go through all of the red tape that I can just imagine in terms of calling up the National Guard. Because again, like I said, while the National Guard is held in the state, the governor can use it locally, but because they operate under slightly different rules than the regular army does. But at the same time, they're also beholden to the United States president, which brings us to another legal battle that's going on within the court system. The state of Oklahoma, the commander of the National Guard troops in Oklahoma basically said, I am not going to enforce the Pentagon's ordered mandate for vaccines in Oklahoma. He basically said that, or he or she, whoever it is, basically said, we're not going to do that for our troops. And the Pentagon said, no, you actually are, because we're the ones in charge of you. And now it has gone into the court system. So now it hasn't been heard. I haven't heard anything about it, but realistically yet. But I know that it's on the docket. I know that a lawsuit has been filed. And so this, honestly, right now we have got probably the greatest petri dish for the true operation of our government and the formation of how things are going to be laid out moving forward in the future. So somebody, and I think it was, it might have been Dan Bongino, but somebody said that Trump's greatest accomplishment, honestly, was to appoint all of these federal judges that are out there, all of these conservative judges. Now, a lot of people think, oh, the greatest thing was, the Supreme Court. And I'll be honest with you, the Supreme Court, Kavanaugh's been kind of lackluster. Amy Coney Barrett just got put on. This is her first, so this abortion case is her first real case that's been argued in front of her. And honestly, in the news, she's been actually kind of quiet about it. She hasn't really said anything. I can tell you that Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito are the two people on the court that actually do want to get rid of Roe versus Wade decision. And honestly, I believe rightfully so. It should never have gotten to that point. I think I've already stated that multiple times. But the fact of the matter is that having all of these federal judges that have gotten put out by the previous administration, I think is a really, really good thing. It's a really good thing. And the reason being is because the liberal left honestly has been pushing and pushing and pushing the court system to legislate from the bench. And that's part of why Roe versus Wade happened, was because of the legislation from the bench. Now, realistically, again, I'm a strict constitutionalist. I think that if it's not written in here or the meaning is not in here, then honestly, it shouldn't even be discussed. It shouldn't even be a part of what's considered part of the Constitution. And you should take the Constitution at pretty close to face value, meaning that things like the right to keep and bear arms is a right of the people. Okay? It is a right of the people, the individual person, to keep and bear arms. It doesn't have anything to do with whether they're a part of the militia or not. The reasoning for the part of the militia actually is the reason why the individual needs to keep and bear arms. Now, there's arguments that could be made in terms of the type of arms or whatever. Again, we're kind of talking it's about some gray areas here because we've built upon the foundation, the concrete foundation of the Constitution. We got to build the frame of the house too. And so there's a lot of other laws that are put in there, namely things like the congressional law in terms of the Brady bill back in the 90s, the 80s and 90s. I think it's actually the 90s, in terms of banning like automatic weapons. That obviously probably shouldn't be in the hands of an individual. But even then, I mean, it's not like totally banned. You can go to the government, you can appeal to the government, pay whatever the fee is, and actually be able to have an automatic weapon. But be that as it may, the point being here is that this right now, and the way that that we have going, the lawsuits that we have on the books right now are really pushing states' rights. And I've made this comment multiple times where, Governor DeSantis does have it right. He's like, Biden can't mandate to us what we do. He can't tell us what we do. I'm the governor of the state. The legislature makes the laws. So he's mostly irrelevant here. And honestly, I think his position is pretty darn correct in most cases. I won't say all cases, but in most cases. And the same thing goes with, Governor Abbott out in Texas. They're doing the same. They're doing very similar things as what Ron DeSantis is doing. But they have a grip and an understanding on the Constitution the way that it actually should be, not the way that it is necessarily interpreted today. And again, like I said, I think there's been a lot of arguments back and forth about the position of states' rights within the Constitution and about states' rights and how it frames itself to the federal government. The federal government is supposed to be small. It's not supposed to be huge, and we've overstepped the bounds. We've extended that to be a huge issue. And I'm seeing it's even scary to think of that a lot of our state senators, I've seen in particular state senators for my home state, that have been making statements and claims and things like that about, the infrastructure bill and building back better and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, but none of that actually really should be a part of the discussion. The federal government is to exist according to the Constitution of the United States right here. It is to exist, and I'm looking off to the left, by the way, just because that's where my monitor is. It exists to provide protection for the states from foreign entities. That's it. That literally, and occasionally to act as the mediator for when two states are in a argument with each other. It's also supposed to, the federal government is also supposed to act as the liaison between the United States and other foreign entities, foreign powers, such as things like the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, now has been changed over. Any kind of interest in terms of foreign dignitaries coming to the United States in order to do business here, or that kind of stuff, the federal government has an interest in that. In order to monitor and regulate trade from the states to foreign entities and vice versa, that belongs to the federal government. But none of this stuff in terms of things like, mandating vaccines for the public, or, dealing with infrastructure outside of maybe federal infrastructure, even then that's questionable. Things like that, all of that realistically should fall to the states, to the individual states that are here in this Constitution. The Constitution is the framework, and the framework basically shows, when you look at all of the adjoining documents, the framework basically shows that the federal government is at the top of the pyramid, being the smallest, and local governments way down low, down closest to the people, are the larger part of the situation, and they are the ones that are the most powerful at the local level. And that's the way it should be. And that's the way I think these cases that you're seeing going through the courts right now should shake out. And I'll be honest with you, I for a while there, I was actually thinking Ron DeSantis was going to end up in a situation where he was going to get sued by the federal government, and where we're going to see states' rights actually hit. That's still potentially possible, because there are a lot of things that both Texas and Florida and some of these other ones, like North Dakota and Idaho and some of these other governors who aren't quite as popular are presenting themselves within the political sphere that are starting to stand up and basically say, no, the federal government does not need to be dictating any of this stuff to us. And realistically, that's the way it should be. Historically, that was the whole premise. The whole idea of the federal government was to essentially do things that the states themselves couldn't. Now, there was a time back before with the Articles of Confederation, which was actually part of the problem before the Constitution was made, but the Articles of Confederation didn't handle a lot of that stuff. And so what you ended up with is you had states that were making agreements with foreign powers and foreign trades and actually undercutting other states, which led to the idea that, hey, we need a federal government that can help cover all of this, state to state trade and state to foreign country trade. And again, that's just all part and parcel of the federal government. And the federal government was supposed to collect taxes only to do those operations. There's nothing that talks about the Constitution in terms of having a federal bureau of investigation or, the CIA, I can understand. NSA, you could probably roll the CIA and the NSA together. You could, because they both are supposed to be looking at foreign powers in relation to the United States. Although if you look at those two entities, the NSA does have the ability to look at American people as long as it is accidentally caught up in a net with foreign powers, as what happened to Tucker Carlson not too long ago. And the CIA has absolutely no right and no mandate, nothing to work on foreign soil. In fact, they're not even supposed to operate at all, just like the Army is not supposed to necessarily operate on American soil outside of, practicing and stuff like that. But the missions are not supposed to be here. So, that's where a lot of people talk about, well, martial law can be declared. Okay, except we've got a bit of a problem with that, and that has to deal with the fact that the Army itself, the Posse Comitatus Act, I believe is what it's called, has issues. So, wow. So a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. It's going to be interesting to see how these things shake out. I'll be honest with you in terms of the abortion case. Well, first of all, I think the Sixth Circuit Court is going to, for the OSHA case, my prediction is the Sixth Circuit Court is going to say, yeah, this is unconstitutional. It's going to go up to the Supreme Court. I already stated that. Do I think the Supreme Court's going to throw it out? Probably. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they probably will, because honestly, there is no basis of it. There's no legal basis for any of that to be there. And OSHA, even though OSHA was created by a law by Congress and does exist, this doesn't have anything to do with OSHA existing. What this has to do with is, does OSHA have the power to do vaccine mandates? And the charter by Congress to OSHA was to focus directly on the safety and health of occupations, meaning on your job. The vaccine kind of falls outside and inside of that. So that's where the legal ramifications are going to come into play. In the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's organization, Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring's organization, did join and they are actually named as a individual on the Sixth Circuit Court lawsuit, and they basically are arguing that, yeah, OSHA was not given the specific mandate to do this, or the specific ability to do this by the OSHA, by the act, the law that created OSHA, and so therefore it shouldn't fall into this. Much like here in the state of Washington, I've been hearing, I don't have this confirmed, but I've been hearing that the emergency powers of Governor Jay Inslee are actually not mandated by the legislative law that, or not, sorry, I keep using the word mandated, but they're not defined by the legislative law, the revised Code of Washington, that actually states that he can be given emergency powers in cases of emergency. And I've heard, although I don't have this confirmed, but I've heard that there is a lawsuit pending on that very nature for him to have to rescind his emergency powers. Again, this whole COVID thing and this pandemic, I think, has brought a lot of things to light. It's brought a lot of things that are overstepping and overreaching of governmental entities to light to the American people. I think that that this realistically is, like I said, this is a petri dish. This is a lab. This is the true action of American civics in action today in terms of all of these things. And why a lot of this stuff hasn't been challenged in court yet, I don't know. It probably has to deal with money. People just don't have it. But the reality is it's going to be interesting to watch some of these cases and how they fall out and where things go with this. Because again, regardless of what everybody tells you, and the liberal left is freaking over, really freaking over this abortion law, or this abortion case. But legally speaking, if Roe versus Wade does get overturned, or Casey versus Ferguson does get overturned, if that does get overturned in whole or even in part, has nothing to do with whether or not abortion will be available or whether it's legal. Because again, it'll fall back to whatever part gets taken, provided that John Roberts doesn't make it like this really narrow and specific ruling, which honestly is not what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. But his beliefs are of the Supreme Court's purpose is not that. That's why all of his rulings, especially those, the most notable, those of the Obamacare Act, the Affordable Care Act, why he made them so freaking narrow is because he didn't want the court to be tainted by an overturning. This is going to be interesting, again, to watch, to see, and to figure out where do we go from here and how we move forward. But the reality of it is no, you're not going to lose your abortion rights. It's just not going to happen. You may have them changed some, or you may have a state or two that might outlaw abortion, in which case you have to take that fight to that state. But I honestly don't think abortions are going to be completely outlawed. There will be states like Washington, Oregon, California, New York, all strongholds for people who believe that abortion is a right and within the Constitution, that are going to make it to where you'll just have to travel to those states to go get one, I guess. But I really don't think that that's going to make it as big of a splash as what they're making it out to be. Now, I'm coming up onto my hour. So that, folks, honestly, we need to get back to our constitutional roots. We need to focus on what the Constitution meant, not what it's been warped and turned into over time, but to go back in time to the founding documents, to documents such as the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the Declaration of Independence, the Magna Carta, to understand and get a bigger feeling in terms of what our country is supposed to be like. And whether people believe it or not, those founding documents are amazing. They were revolutionary, if you'll pardon the pun, at their time. They were incredible, and they have standed the test of time so far, as long as they have been applied correctly and the way that they should be. And I think right now, today, in the 2020s, okay, we're going to see a very large change in how the government operates, should everything go the way that it should go in terms of the way the founding documents are supposed to be interpreted. I know I'm excited about it. I'm certainly hoping that you will be excited about it too, for the most part. And that is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor. I know I've picked up a couple of subscribers here recently on Rumble. Go to my Rumble account. I actually transmit under a different, Whiskey Musings is there, but when I set it up, I set up both a Whiskey Musings account and a Whiskey Musings channel. The channel is where I push all the videos to. So go there, sign up, subscribe there. If you like YouTube, then go there. I am under Whiskey Musings on YouTube. You can also catch me on Spreaker, an audio portion. I also push that audio portion out to places like Spotify, iHeartRadio, several other places. So if you're listening to me live on Spreaker tonight, thank you very much. If you're listening to me live anywhere, thank you. Because, of course, without you, this show would not be possible. I do appreciate it, but also do me a favor as well. I have one more favor to ask. Well, actually, I have two more favors to ask, but I'm going to do it kind of lump them all into one. If you like the show and you've already subscribed, do me a favor. Spread the word. Talk to other people. Get with me on, follow me on my social media accounts. I've had them running under here this entire time. Twitter, Facebook, Locals. I have a Locals account now, and Locals, I haven't done anything for the subscription side yet, but I do have the subscription paywall open. It's a monthly fee. I plan on doing some behind the scenes videos, some videos and things maybe just of me just spouting off during the week. That'll be there available for you. Like I said, I haven't done them yet, so I apologize for that, but I'm still kind of trying to figure it out and figure out what I want to do with it. Same thing too. I'm also considering kicking off what's called a quarter shot of whiskey. It is a podcast that will be on Spreaker and it will be sent out. It will be audio only and it will be sent out to multiple places. I'm looking forward to maybe doing that. I've been kind of tossing that around for a while in my head. But anyway, do me a favor also too, if you like the show and everything else, you want to help support the show, please do me a favor. Go to my shop.whiskeymusings.online. That's shop.whiskeymusings.online. I've got some sweatshirts, t-shirts, hoodies. I've got leggings. I've got a couple of other things like mugs and stickers. You don't have to do a lot, but I tried to make them affordable. They all have the whiskey logo or my phrase, "When I drink, I think," on them. So go and visit them, maybe get a gift or something for Christmas coming up. In fact, I should probably kick off a discount, which maybe I'll do on the next show. Maybe I'll kick that out for a discount on that. They are made to order. It is what it is. It's just made to order. So it usually takes, somewhere between 3 to 4 weeks. That might slow down a little bit due to our supply chain issues, but still, I'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate following. I'd appreciate subscribing. I'd appreciate going and letting all of your friends know if you do enjoy the program and the content. Thank you very much, because you are my only promotional aspects is you people. So thank you very much. Appreciate you watching tonight, and we'll see you all next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.